And welcome to a special episode of Tiger Talks, our TED-style program featuring Salem University alumni, faculty, and friends of the university. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Barnhart, Dean of General Education and First-Year Academic Experience. With me today is our special guest, PJ Scott. He's a Salem University alumnus and graduate of the class of 2017. He is Deputy Chief of Police at the Morgantown Police Department in Morgantown, West Virginia. Deputy Chief Scott, welcome to Tiger Talks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before we start, we like to kind of get down to business with our guests and allow them to introduce themselves, a little bit about your background, maybe how you got to Salem and what you're doing today.
Okay. I grew up in West Virginia, originally from Philippi, which is in Barber County, not too far from Salem. Bounced around a little bit as a kid, ultimately wound up here in Morgantown, graduated high school from Morgantown, went to WVU straight out of high school. Went there for 3 years, kind of got the idea that I was going to go into law enforcement, started putting in applications and testing. Morgantown actually moved the quickest and offered me a position before I even entered my senior year of college. So I kind of debated on whether, it'd be best to finish that last year of college or start my career. Ultimately, I ended up starting at the police department and then went to the police academy, got out on the road and all that. And then that last year, college kind of fell by the wayside for a little bit. I took some classes sporadically at WVU after starting working. It's kind of hit and miss, just based on my schedule and availability and WVU's class schedule, how it could work out. Online classes were kind of still in their infancy back then. This would have been 2003, 4, somewhere in there. So not quite as efficient as they are today. So was doing some of those. Then I moved into different positions. I went into a detective position and then a supervisory position where it was kind of on call more. The schedule wasn't as consistent. It was made going back to school even more difficult. You fast forward 7 more years, then started a family, have children, it becomes even harder. And then we get to around the time around 2015, 2016, my kids are, they're still young, but they're not a newborn anymore. But so I decided to start looking at going back at that point. I just kind of was starting to think about doing that when Dr. Lounsbury from Salem and someone I think from the admissions office actually came to the Morgantown Police Department to kind of promote their criminal justice program and then the online classes that they offer and how you could finish up, or for those that even needed to go to college completely or those that were finishing up. And it sounded like a good fit. So that's kind of how I wound up at Salem.
No, that's great. Well, let's talk about your experience a little bit like that. So, as a maybe like a non-traditional student, like an adult, coming back with family and a job already. Talk about that experience. What was maybe your experience like as that, non-traditional student? What did you find, your favorite part of the whole experience, kind of from that non-traditional space?
It was basically the setup of the online schedule at Salem was, perfect for someone who's a non-traditional student that has other obligations with, family and work. The monthly class schedule and then the spacing and the kind of the pacing of the class was ideal for that. You didn't have, there was a scheduled activities and deadlines and stuff, but you kind of knew going in what it was, and some of them were flexible and you could speak with your instructors. It was kind of perfect because I know in my scenario, I was right when I started, I knew a couple months out that there was going to be a promotional test for our department, which requires a lot of reading. It's basically like a class. So I didn't take a class that month at Salem's, got my promotional test, got promoted, and then just went back the next month, and it didn't miss a beat. So it was kind of nice where, when I was doing it at WVU with their online classes, it's, a bevy of classes all semester, and then it's kind of a nightmare to schedule, especially if something pops up, like for me, like where, if you have a week where you have a major incident or something as a detective and you're tied up basically 16 hours a day for 5-10 days. It's just throws it could throw your schooling out the window there for that brief period of time. But Salem's was set up nice, and then the instructors and the professors were extremely accommodating for, I think, at least in my instance, when I approached them saying, hey, here's what's going on, they were like, oh, that's fine, just do this here, then get here. And then as I got more used to be in the classes, I kind of just learned, I always tried to work ahead. That way I didn't have that problem. And that was one big change from when I was a student earlier in life, where I didn't procrastinate as much and was more prepared and more schedule oriented.
Little change of perspective
Exactly.
can do wonders sometimes there. Well, let's talk about that a little bit more in terms of experience. What, from that perspective, what was the biggest obstacle that maybe you faced while you were coming back to finish your degree here at Salem?
I think the biggest obstacle was just getting over the apprehension or fear of just doing it. I'd been, from the last class I took online at WVU till starting at Salem it was over 10 years. And it was just like, can I do this, with the time, the kids, the wife, the job, is it going to, because I know the last couple of classes I took at WVU, just the time just did not work out. So, but at Salem, I think it was just getting over that initial fear. And then once you kind of got in the groove of the classes and stuff, it went super quick and no issues and no problems and stuff. And then it just was not as near as intimidating as I thought it was going to be.
That's good. That's good. Taking that that fear out of higher ed, can be an important thing to help, foster people to go back. How did it play out in your career though? Being in the field already while you were kind of finishing your degree, how did your experience maybe help in your current role? What would you say is the biggest key to your success, in criminal justice, whether that's from Salem or something that you had prior to that?
No, the classes at Salem were extremely beneficial. They, being that I worked in the same field that I was studying for multiple years, I'd known some of it, so it made it a little easier for me. But jumping into, there was always something I didn't know. In each class, I picked up on something that was useful and I could apply to what I was doing day to day. And then another part of the career helping some of the classes used the same texts that our promotional exams used. They were the exact same books and stuff. So that helped it tremendously. But moving forward, I wasn't sure that I wanted to enter a administrative role like I'm in now at that point, but I didn't want that door to be closed. And having a degree, and more often not, for a deputy chief position or a chief position, they're requiring an advanced degree or graduate degree now. So I just didn't want to be limited by not having it. Wasn't sure I was going to need it, but just wanted to have it in my back pocket to say, in case I did. And ultimately, when this position I'm in now came open, it just worked out. And after I graduated from Salem, I went directly into, I started a graduate program back at WVU, and I finished that back in May of 2020. So the timing of it all kind of worked out perfectly. We're finished that up, and then less than a year later, deputy chief position open here, and I met the qualifications. And it worked out.
Absolutely right. It's like you said, have that in your back pocket. It's good to have it when you need it, right? Yeah. It's like an umbrella, right? You only need it till you realize you don't have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that. How about advice for current students, future students, maybe recent graduates? What's your biggest piece of advice, in terms of talking to a person who maybe is aspirational to breaking into the criminal justice field?
One's just, as far as the schooling and the courses go and stuff, like I said earlier, just especially a lot of classes being online and self-paced, is just to keep yourself motivated. I know it's hard sometimes, but keep motivated. Don't fall behind. Stay up to date on stuff. It's so much easier if you're just either ahead or on the pace you're supposed to be. When you fall behind, it starts to, snowball, and then things pop up, and something else pops up outside of school and it throws it all off. Just stay up to date on stuff. If you have any problems, talk to instructors and professors. I think some students are intimidated to approach a professor or instructor and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this, or I have an issue with this, or, I need, some kind of accommodation to help me succeed in this. And more often than not, they're extremely understanding and helpful. I think it's just being older, it was easier to contact a professor and say, hey, I have this going on this week. Can I move it to this week? And not all of them. I mean, some of them are going to say no, but just don't be scared to ask questions or ask for help.
Great. No, that's great advice there. And then lastly, this is our section of parting words, kind of our last opportunity for our guests to, let folks know where to check them out at. So, folks that maybe are interested in like what you're doing with Morgantown Police Department, where could they find more information on that?
You can go to the City of Morgantown's website, which is morgantownwv.com. You can find links to the police department website within there. For those that are looking into careers in law enforcement, the police department here in Morgantown is hiring. Our next test is October 16th. We're accepting applications up until that deadline, and all the requirements and everything, the information on that test is on that website as well. And even if there's criminal justice students or other students at Salem not even interested in a job with the Morgantown Police Department, or that are interested in career in law enforcement, whether it be state, local, or federal, I would advise them to possibly look into not even take any tests, just as a practice run, whether or not that's the job you specifically want. A lot of those testing procedures are the same from department to department, and then would give you some valuable experience moving forward if, say, if a student here ultimately wanted to test with another department down the road.
Excellent. Great. Well, we'll definitely plug that with, in the details for this episode, which will be out before the deadline for the test. So hopefully we'll get you some applicants there. But again, for Deputy Chief Scott, thank you again for taking some time to talk with us here on Tiger Talks. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And for those of you watching at home, thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.